Our next presenter is Susana Bustos. Susana is a clinical psychologist from Chile. She has worked on psychospiritual integration of experiences in non-ordinary states of consciousness for the past 10 years. Susana conducts independent research on shamanic traditions, and she teaches courses on entheogenic shamanism and research at CIIS. I have had the privilege to be Susana's student this semester, so it's an honor to introduce her. Please welcome Susana.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm thrilled of this conference, and many of my students have been putting it together and presenting. It's just amazing. And this is going to be a different presentation in that normally I use PowerPoints too, and this is going to be an old school type of thing. They put this conference in a month together, and that meant that many of us had to really hurry up in order to get things together to present. And the theme that I normally present on is on Icaros. I have done a lot of research on that area, and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to be down in Peru again, starting end of June for a year, doing more research and also working at Takiwasi, a Center for Drug Abuse Rehabilitation that combines traditional medicine from the jungle with Western psychotherapy. So basically, I didn't do my homework of doing the PowerPoint presentation for the first time with my own students. I'm just apologize for that. And I'm going to be talking about my reflections on the integration of entheogenic experiences based on this a little. Thank you. Based on what I have learned working at Takiwasi for several times, for different stays I have done down there, and also the many years I have been working as a holotropic breathwork practitioner. Holotropic breathwork is a method created by Stanislav Grof, that many of you may know, and that combines hyperventilation, sequence of music, and also body work to access expanded states of consciousness. I have seen similarities between entheogenic experiences and integration of entheogenic experiences, and also integration of holotropic states in general. And I also have seen how holotropic breathwork could be a way of doing integration of entheogenic experiences afterwards. It's used afterwards in that it slows down the experience, and it also goes directly into those contents of the mind that are activated, and one can keep processing using that technique. So the work that I did in the Amazon opened up the possibility to address people here in the US and abroad, people like any of us seeking healing and transformation within traditional and non-traditional entheogenic shamanic practices, who felt left open, shaken, thin, incomplete, and sometimes abused, haunted, or disintegrated after their journeys. It is not a secret that different entheogenic shamanic traditions and religious forms of entheogenic use have been progressively available to the Western seeker. Particularly interesting has been the international expansion of the Brazilian ayahuasca churches, the apprenticeship of Westerners with indigenous or mestizo shamans, the traveling of shamans or shamans' apprentices to different countries, and the many different ways and amalgamations in which ceremonial use of ayahuasca has been adapted to the West. Okay, but this is also true not only for ayahuasca. At a different scale is also true for other ceremonial uses of entheogens, such as the ones around the cactus huachuma or San Pedro and the African root iboga. There have been a lot of amalgamations and new expansions as well. Since the offer has grown along with the demand, we may expect an increase of people seeking integration after ceremonies that do not hold as part of their practice a stable group of peers and or a deeper bonding with the guide. and where their participants tend to be left at their own resources after or shortly after the work is over. Of course, and this is something I want to stress, of course, entheogenic experiences seem to follow a natural integrative drive and direction. Therefore, intervention is not always needed, right? I want to bring up here the ideas of Kenneth Tupper, who is a Canadian researcher, a policymaker, and policies basically around entheogens. And his idea is to, he has many ideas on the use of entheogens, but one that I really respect is talking about entheogens as tools. So we're talking about tools within different contexts, right? So the different contexts add or not to benefit maximization of the experience. And in my understanding, it's not just the set and setting that we can put out as a context. There's much more to it. I would add also way of extending the context into conscious integration. And I think that benefit maximization would strongly benefit from intentional integration after session. Okay, so I'm gonna be talking about insights coming from the therapeutic use of psychedelics, insights on how these insights would help healthy integration. And then I'm going to go into traditional shamanic ways. And then I'm going to go into my own reflections. And these reflections are not overarching. And they're, as I was writing this week, my article, they were just coming to my mind, right? Like, what are the things I want to really share with you from my experience? So I'm going to just go through the literature a little bit, and then I'm going to go into my own reflections from clinical practice. So the importance of integration has been stressed in much of the literature on psychedelic psychotherapy. What we do know is that the integration of a session will be probably smoother if the person, one, prepares for the experience. So we got all the information that Natalie Metz was sharing with us as a physical type of preparation. That also physical preparation that's suggested is to have enough rest and sleep, light food the previous day, and an empty stomach during the experience. Also, Stan Grof particularly addresses with the clients before the sessions all the experiential range of possibilities, including transference issues that might happen during the session, in an effort to prepare the rational mind for surprises and diminish cognitive defenses. Right? So that's basic stuff. Prepare yourself for the experience. That comes from what we know from psychedelic psychotherapy. Also, this helps is if you hold an intention for the work and you're ready to release it before the session starts. And probably most of you already know this, right? This reflects the benefits of the paradoxical effect of going through the process of aligning oneself with one's deeper needs in preparation for the experience, and then letting go as a sign of trust on one's deeper organic wisdom or individuation drive. 3 is also if you have a good bonding with the guide. This is very important. Hasn't been really stressed enough, I think. And or the container of an ongoing therapeutic relationship. Trusting the guide as someone with experience and whom to rely upon is key to develop a sense of safety and comfort with the work. We are here in this country really individualistic in that way. We all know that, right? And then we just go for journeys on our own. Many times, and then we tap into things that are difficult sometimes, and just struggle with whatever is in front of us as good warriors. I have seen also in holotropic breathwork how important it is to have someone to contain the experience that you really trust. You can really go deeper in your own experience here. The other recommendation coming from psychedelic psychotherapy is that during the experience, you're ready to embrace the material, any material that comes to awareness, in lieu of fighting or resisting it. The fifth is that you have an interpersonal or group context for reviewing and valuing the non-ordinary experience. And this has been associated with retention of insights, as well as with validation and motivation to implement them in daily life. And the sixth is that there are some guidelines to follow after the experience, such as devoting the next day to integrate the experience, take it in, be mindful about with whom to share the experience, abstain from making important decisions in the weeks following the experience, journaling as a way to recover lost aspects of the experience and metabolize emotions, and suggestions of therapeutic methods that could favor psychological integrations. Okay, so these are like things that are in the literature that I can rescue, right? And they just like go beyond. They are not just about what to do after the ceremony. They are all about what do you do before, what do you do during, and then what do you do after the ceremony, right? But beyond these general guidelines, we don't find much in the literature regarding how the process of integration unfolds. We don't find much about what integration really means. What does integration mean, right? And how to face the obstacles on the road. What are the pitfalls, that we face when we are integrating material? What happens, right? The indications on how to integrate these experiences are often brief and the procedures broad. I just want to mention that also in reviewing the literature, I have found interesting the distinction between integration and implementation that some authors bring forth. For example, House points out that integration refers to cognitive and emotional processing of the experience, a meaning-making process that needs to be incorporated into one's perspectives on self and the world. He stresses a lot like the cognitive aspect of broader and broader frameworks. Okay, there are also other authors that stress the emotional component, and I have never seen an integration process without a strong emotional content, a strong emotional drive there. Then Marston and Lukov also employ this distinction between implementation and integration. So implementation involves the motivation to change one's behavior based on the gained insights. So Charles Stark too has, commented like how many people he knows who have followed entheogenic practices for a long time, or psychedelic practices as well, and then they don't change. What changes is the subject of what they talk about. So we're talking about spiritual things, and we're, in the way that we talk about cars, and other people. So he says that really to really incorporate the insights that we gain in entheogenic experiences requires a whole deal of effort. It requires conscious intention. It's just not a magic bullet, and we should know that. Okay, so now moving to the wisdom of traditional entheogenic shamanic practices. I'm going to just talk about how do they do this thing? How do they do the integration? So when we look into the wisdom of these practices, we rarely find guidelines for integration work. Rarely. In Peruvian Vegetalismo, I have found more guidelines to take care of oneself after a plant diet in the mountain than after an ayahuasca ceremony. Usually these guidelines are energetic and physical, not psychological. Okay? Depending on the plant dieted, one has to avoid direct exposure to the sun for a couple of weeks. Sexual abstinence has to continue for about a month and has to culminate with a ritual involving black tobacco. In certain areas of the jungle, they just, ask you to use mapacho to just before the sexual act, to just blow tobacco on yourself and also blow the tobacco onto your partner. And in that way, you can exchange energetically without depleting yourself after a long diet. There are also certain social contexts that are preferably avoided, and certain dietary guidelines need to continue after a plant diet. Ayahuasca ceremonies and purges often are advised to culminate with a shower after sleep in order to cut the effects of the plant. And preparation is indispensable also for integration afterwards, for a good success. Yet consider the following. In shamanic-oriented cultures, even if mestizaje has paid its toll, the curandero is often legitimized within the community, right? So people know them, their lineage, their successes, and sometimes their weaknesses are part of the stories everybody knows or has access to, right? Like, he likes women, right? We know that. He has some weaknesses, right? People with more experience with the medicine ways tend to tell their stories, thus acting as reference for the neophyte. If someone goes to see a curandero, it's because there is trust in his or her ways, and there is a concrete healing intention behind. So you don't just go to do self-exploration most of the times. In traditional shamanic cultures, you have a healing intention. You hold a healing intention, or you hold a purpose, or you hold you have a problem and you need to resolve that problem, and you need indications how to do it because you're lost, right? Many people go to the curandero once Western medicine has proven to be ineffective to address their illnesses. And what I have seen also being down is that I'm talking right now only about the Amazon when I'm saying this, in Peru, is that many doctors down there tell people, we don't know what to do, what else to do with you. You have been here for 2 months or 3 months with this colitis, we just cannot do anything else. We think that you should go to see a curandero. Go and see a curandero. Okay. So there's also a legitimation of these ways among Western doctors down there, which is fabulous, right? We are just like, what I'm trying to say is that that there are cosmological elements present in these cultures, even if mestizaje is stronger and stronger in the different cultures, right? That allows for an easier entering into entheogenic practices and then going back socially. The integration is much easier. I have 2 minutes?
No, there's
1 hour.
Oh, she gets 1 hour?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I will probably have until like 3:20?
Yeah, that's fine.
3:20? That's fine. Okay. So these fragments of shamanic cosmologies, from the Upper Amazon to Huautla de Jimenez, in Mexico, where the Niños Santos or the sacred mushrooms are used, support the meaning making of the experiences accessed. So the social context tends to validate and expand on the gained insights. And this is interesting. Also, within the culture, it's expected to see effects. So you just don't go to a ceremony, and go without showing that something has changed, right? The change is expected. if changes are not perceived, either the curandero or the client lose credibility. So we're talking about implementation is expected, right? And the medicine work plays a social function beyond the individual function. And I'm not trying here to depict a perfect setup for integration to unfold without obstacles, in this context. I'm just, I know that obstacles are part of the medicine road. What I'm trying to point out is that integration and reintegration seems to unfold in much smoother ways when the social container and associated cosmologies are more or less in line with the work. Therefore, guidelines for integration are not as needed as they are for us as Westerners embarking in traditional or neo-shamanic entheogenic practices. Okay, that is context, and I just wanted to bring it up to start addressing 4 reflections. And as I said before, these reflections are not overarching. There is much more to say, but those were the ones that were coming to me as important to share today with you. The first is that the integration process starts within the entheogenic experience itself. This has been described in the literature on psychedelics as occurring during the transition into normal consciousness. Right? As you transition into normal consciousness, you start gaining bigger perspective, larger perspective of what you had experienced. And you're open enough also, the psychointegrative engine it's working so that you can really make connections at that time. In my experience with clients who partake in ceremonies with ayahuasca and wachuma separately, the integration process may start even earlier than that within the ceremony. I have seen that particularly after experiences involving unitive or non-dual consciousness, which fully engages the body-mind complex, the experience unfolds through a stage where the sense of personal identity is slowly recovered, right? You slowly recover your personal identity after unitive consciousness experience, accompanied by a visionary component of highly symbolic nature that progresses into recognizable images, including memories with a strong personal meaning. The person starts to understand the unitive experience as a restorative moment to an original state of being, and sees how that restoration was needed in order to address meaningful personal material in a new and healthier way within the ceremony. So we're talking about how do we integrate and how do we implement within the experience itself, right? Usually insights on the effects of this new state on broader personal context emerge to awareness, as well as ways to implement this knowledge in their daily lives. I'm going to just read an example here of a person who is coming out of this is not a complete example, but it's when the person was coming out of a whole ceremony where the unitive consciousness was there, particularly with an Icaro in this case, which has been part of my research, right? And then he starts getting insights on other things and how that experience affects his other areas of his life. I knew that my smoking was harming my body, but the actual experiencing on how this was related to many other tensions and my own level of consciousness was what made it become a healing experience. I actually stopped inhaling tobacco smoke a week before and smoking entirely several days before. At the moment of this realization, I saw, or rather experienced, how my breath was connected to my level of consciousness, energy level, and the tension beginning in my throat and radiating outward. Also, with regards to the trigger in my breath, after the Icaro finished, I smelled other people's sharing some mapachos. I smelled those mapachos. The smoke hit me and I felt its energy and it was very strong. I realized I didn't need to inhale the Mapache smoke to use its energy. It's already there. And that the breath of the Mapache should not be mixed with the breath of life. I was shown that the tightness in my throat was due to poor breath, which in turn was from inhaling tobacco smoke. I said I taught myself how to smoke. So here we see also the person is going out of the ceremony, and he is like using what is there for him to gain bigger insights, larger insights on his teachings for himself, right? I have seen a difference between experienced users and neophytes in that, as Rick Strassman points out, this implementation of insights in their lives within the visionary experience may create the illusion in the neophyte that things have already changed, when in fact they have not. So that's also, a risk. Here's an example of how a person with a reactive depression with anxiety symptoms experienced being defeated by the ayahuasca. Ever since I began to drink ayahuasca, I began to question everything in my life. Someone recognizes that? And I drank with a frequency that for me was a good one, once a month. And after seeing those things, possibilities, changes in the ceremonies, it's very difficult not to see them concretized in your life. You feel very frustrated, very frustrated, very frustrated. Therefore, I think that maybe ayahuasca has also something to do with that, no? Maybe ayahuasca is like a trickster. I don't know. Look, I don't know if it is or if it's not. It's a client. The integration work, once back in ordinary life, needs to reframe the insights and experience changes in the context of the need to manifest them. This implementation requires intention, perseverance, and some deal of effort, as I said before. I'm going to just skip this. My second reflection, an interesting phenomenon of the ceremonial use of entheogens is the dialogical nature of the encounter with the medicine, right? Which may be one of the most distinct differences with the use of refined psychedelic substances in other contexts, right? Madre ayahuasca, madrecita, grandfather peyote, the niños santos, plant teachers, are expressions used by ceremonial participants in shamanic and neo-shamanic contexts of medicine use. The medicine this way can be experienced as an overarching intelligence, guiding and protecting the work, a numinous yet concrete presence during the person's journey. This is usually accompanied by a deep sense of intimacy, safety, and of being taken care of, which results in deeper levels of surrender to the experience. In addition, the person may be able to envision or hear the medicine as an entity communicating with her verbally or non-verbally. So you can, not only felt presence, but you, at some points, and some people are able to see it, envision it. Or the person may engage in a dialogue with the medicine, whether seen or sensed. This sense of alliance with the medicine can be carried inside long after the ceremony is over, and in people engaged in ceremonial practice, it can constitute a lifelong reference, an ongoing dialogue in daily life beyond ceremonial context, right? I have heard expressions from my clients saying, like, I feel that the plant lives in me right now, from now on. From an elder in the Native American church, grandfather peyote and I are friends. So the implications of not only addressing but experiencing the medicines as a transcendent other with motherly or fatherly characteristics are enormous in terms of intrapsychic dynamic. basic trust, restoration of a sense of belonging and being contained, as well as the possibility of experiencing corrective experiences by means of this relationship, are just some of the possibilities. However, there are also some pitfalls here, right? The risks associated with this type of experience in working, with clients, I have seen various forms of ego inflation associated with this special, intimate alliance, right? Where the client is surrounded by a halo of specialness about him or herself and feels entitled to what the plant teacher has to express, what the plant teacher has told her, which is experienced as true without a doubt. So there are different ranges, to that. And I have seen that happen in experienced ayahuasca drinkers in Peru, people actually who give the ayahuasca to other people. But usually in those contexts, a strong bond with the ayahuasquero or maestro, right? The container of apprentices and people with more experience ends up both being supportive and validating, as well as helping the person to take perspective. So it does both things. It validates that experience, but also, hey, well, we're all receiving messages from the plant, right? Like, it's not just you, like that kind of lowering the oh yeah me. Most often, I have seen these cases among Westerners who participate in rituals without a stable community of peers, with none or little bonding with the ayahuasquero, and with a story of loneliness and troubled relationships. This is in my experience. Their work then relies upon personal resources and on the medicine more than on anything else. So it's very important then for them, if there is nothing else but the medicine, to fortify that relationship, right? And that has much more risks, though enormous potential. And I'm not gonna go into the spiritual aspects of that, In these cases, I usually work with normalizing the experience. For example, by stating that many of us experience personal communication, and that usually the teachings have layers and layers of meaning that need to be listened to. In addition, I use the content of the teachings as tools to go deeper into the relational and emotional aspects with oneself and others that may be involved in this phenomenon. Transitional periods. Let's see. Okay, I don't have much more time, and I have two more longer reflections to share with you. I hope you're not that bored with not having images here. And I'm going to talk about the transitional period and what happens with the initial stages of integration. Then my last reflection has to do with long-term integration, and I don't know if I'm going to have time to cover that. Oh yeah? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, good. So I'm going to talk in traditional vegetalismo settings, the transitional period to normal consciousness offers space to rest and to have informal sharing of experiences. You probably know that, some people who have done traditional work. The shaman or apprentices may offer their thoughts on the experiences within their cosmological container, yet most interestingly, this is a time when they do storytelling. And I have seen that over and over in Peru in different contexts, indigenous and mestizo contexts, actually. The storytelling of their own experiences and challenges, encountering mythological beings, sharing teachings, etc., seem to create a sense of intimacy, belonging, and trust. One's own experience reaches broader frameworks vicariously, indirectly, and any remnant feelings of anxiety may seem to vanish. This is, we can also understand this as a form of amplification in Jungian terms, where you just suggest broader contexts that are symbolical and mythological, but you're not interpreting. You're not trying to make meaning consciously and with effort about what happened in your experience. It's in this loose context that it seems to work pretty well. In settings such as certain branches of the Native American church or in the African Buddhist tradition, there is little or no sharing of experiences, since this is considered personal, a matter of oneself and the highest. What happens in neo-shamanic context of entheogenic use or in Western adaptations of traditional work? There's almost always a circle of sharing after sleep and food is restored. This has several benefits. Sleep and dream time keeps organically metabolizing the experience. The account of the experience and the sharing of meaningful personal details can create a sense of bonding, belonging, and trust. Parts of the experience may come back to memory. These circles also offer the possibility of sharing from a deeper place of genuineness experienced within the ceremony, thus providing a safe ground to bridge the depth of the state of being achieved and still alive a few hours after a ceremony and the social encounter, right? It's okay, I just really felt myself in a deeper, more genuine place, and can I talk to a group of people from that place? This is a very beautiful experiment, right? Before their social re-entry. The tone of the circle is most often receptive and non-judgmental. However, what's interesting it's that in treating clients with integration issues, I've also seen a downside of these circles. It may raise performance anxiety, stimulate internal derogatory dialogue in comparing one's experiences with others, in the tone of, mine was not really that deep, mine was not that clear, that meaningful, right? Some participants may feel forced to articulate an experience that feels ineffable or to make their experience coherent for others, not for oneself, thus struggling with the in-group, out-group problem. Am I part of this group or not? Though many of us may have experienced these situations, this becomes an integration issue, most often for people with a history of trauma or depression, low self-esteem, and troubled social relationships. The experience with the medicine gets then enmeshed with the social situation in their memory. And the integration work has to address the experiential reconnection, re-owning, and validation of the experience itself, the entheogenic experience itself, and then address the other things. We may need to rethink the wisdom of the traditional ways in dealing with the few hours after a ceremony. Silent resonance and contemplation of one's experience for a day or two before group sharing may support the experiential contact with the state of being one is still in, which may allow for subtler possibilities of understanding and organismic integration of the experience. So basically what I'm saying is maybe there is something here that we can hear deeper from the entheogenic shamanic practices that are millenary or centenary. Appropriate storytelling with mythological or symbolic content within a loose, intimate format may suggest ways of connecting and making sense of one's experience without imposing interpretations that may freeze the process. And I'm not talking only about interpretations. I also, in any group, there are group dynamics where some people are perceived with more influence on oneself than others. And any comments they might offer, during the circle about one's experience may affect that, the freezing of the process in negative ways. I'm going to talk here about long-term integration. And this is the last. Most of the people I have worked with in the US long for a reconnection with a new state of being they achieved during the entheogenic experience, or a plant diet, whether here in the country or abroad. Often they are not aware of this need unless one works beyond the narrative of the experience and supports their experiential reconnection with it. So what I have seen is that normally what's clear in awareness is the narrative of the experience, right? And also expressions as, it was so strong. It was so strong this time, right? Which is also the emotional impact, of the experience, and the kind of, the different levels of shock also of what you experience at the beginning, and that needs to pass and be metabolized in order to move on with the process of integration. But what I'm trying to say is that beyond the narrative, if one works a little deeper, what you see is that there is something that is missed, and that people that have come to me, at least, are grieving without knowing, which is having left a space of genuineness and integrity, of softness within yourself, a state of I'm gonna just read here because I have written it better than what I can say it. Often the entheogenic work allows people to connect with their experience from a place of deep intimacy and genuineness that is elusive in day-to-day life. Sometimes the state of being refers to a sense of expansion, well-being, and psychological relaxation that has been never experienced before. I have worked with people with a lot of tremendous history of trauma doing ayahuasca work. They tell me, I've never felt so relaxing in my entire life. This is totally new information to me, that I can get to these deeper states. Right? At other times, the state of being refers to accessing a meaningful and healthier state in their ability to relate to others, or to challenging processes from a place of surrender, trust, and innocence, or from a place of unknown power and self-assertion. Most often, these experiences are impregnated of a sense of the numinous self in that way. In my work, I address the contents of experience as needed, yet I have found that finding the thread of Ariadne to reconnect with and cultivate that lost state of being is a foundational stone for any further work. So the question is, how to keep the doors open to accessing, or what I call befriending, that state. I like to use a relational framework with aspects of oneself in that way. I really think that it's very useful to think that you can befriend parts of yourself, that you can befriend anything that's around you, in that way. Inductive experiential methods serve to reconnect organismically with the state and reawaken its conscious awareness. I have seen that a concrete space and time to ritually devote the cultivation of a relationship with this state is effective in many cases. This may include the creation of a sacred space, such an altar, and to identify music, scents, sounds, and or visual symbols that the client associates with that state of being. So you spend time creating and also elucidating what are meaningful sensorial things that will help you go into that state. Discipline and the development of some virtues come into play here as other areas of the integration process unfold in parallel. I also work, again, as I said at the beginning, with holotropic breath work, because that's a very, very straightforward way of accessing similar states. I have I'm going to just say some things about conclusions. I wanted to share also some of my ideas on how the process of integration unfolds and where does it go. But I think I'm going to leave that for another time and then open up for questions. Maybe my main conclusion, is there is a lot to research on the process of integration that hasn't been done. And I always tell my students when I go, I have a class on integration, just one class, in this Entheogenic Shamanic class that I teach at CIIS, say, you want to do your cetacean integration? Please do. I support you. I give you everything that I have. Because there is much more that we need to learn on how to do that, how to navigate that after the ceremony. And then I really think that there is much more that we have overlooked in the wisdom of traditional ways. I'm not talking only about ayahuasca. I'm talking about all the traditions that use entheogens. We tend to generalize and overlook details of the whole context that may make a huge difference in how we reintegrate to society afterwards. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna open the floor for questions.
So you earlier were mentioning about the use of tobacco and other forms of
Can you speak louder, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You were talking about using like tobacco and other things for being able to prepare oneself and engaging with either a partner or just being reintegrating. And that's often information you get from your family or your community when you're in the midst of something, of a community that uses these types of medicine. But when you're somewhere outside of that type of community, what are your thoughts on how that information can best be shared other than in that one moment? Because there's a lot of different information. I mean, that would take a lot of time. Not that it's bad to take a lot of time. When some people are like, showing up to something that's at 200 plus people and they're just expecting it to be like, like that. And I don't really approve of it being that way. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. I'm just curious about what your thoughts are on that.
Your question is how to share the information in that way, and this is the tricky part. I mean, I'm sharing this, that I learned in one particular area of the Upper Amazon that is common practice among certain practitioners.
Yeah.
But then that might be not a suggestion that might be given within, the other area right by them.
Yep.
Right. So what are you going to be following?
Yeah.
Right. It's very confusing if you don't go and commit to one particular practice for a while, and you deepen that connection. It's like going through different churches every Sunday, something like that. I really think that there is a cultivation to do with one way, so that you can get all the subtleties of that, or as much as possible, as much as it feels that it's calling you.
Mm-hmm.
This is as much as I can say, because I don't know if that's going to be useful for you or not in the context of what are you doing.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to repeat that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's very important.
Susana, I thank you. I really loved how you analyze the circles, because it's people super take for granted that this circles is some sort of integration. But I like that you looked to this with the eyes of a psychologist on what is actually going on there. What is the psychological process? Because frequently this is not hold with any kind of psychological parameter. It's just people are spontaneous, and that's nice. They want to make something about it. But just sitting and talking, I don't think that that's necessarily therapeutic. And I just really loved how you look to the situation of those circles, and what are the kind of weird things that can happen as well. And I think that this deserves comment, that maybe you never hear this kind, and that's how I feel in those circles particularly, because also some ways to drink ayahuasca value silence and value introspection, so there's a kind of forced integration that I think that it, not always can be good for people, so I want to comment that, and I want to make a question. My question is, like, here in the USA, I have noticed that particularly maybe in San Francisco, 1 out of each 3 words that people say is the word community. So I want to understand what is this category community, because you are from Chile and you live here, no? Right? So I don't get it because they say, oh, our community, but to me this is a commercial thing, and I don't understand so much. I can integrate community with commercialism, because like to the end of the day, you hire a shaman, you pay like 250 or 300 or 100, it varies, and you drink. But people are talking about the community. But actually it's like a service. But I know there is a community as well.
Right.
But I mean, you pay to go and drink, but then there is no paying to meet after,
Right.
So that is confusing on this setting for me. I would like to hear you about that.
Well, I think that you're hitting up something there, right? Yeah. I think that we have a lot of need for community, and then we talk about community also because there is an in-group. We're in the context of illegal use of ayahuasca and other substances here. So what feels that is in the same line here inside is community, and what is outside, it might be not, right? Community. So there is this feeling of in-group and out-group that I think happens, and we tend to call community to those people. And I have seen here in the US a lot of reliance upon peers too. So when I've heard also from students, and from other people saying, I don't trust a shaman just coming and like giving the ayahuasca. I would prefer to just have a circle of good friends where we can do like good self-exploration with this. This person that comes and goes, I don't even understand what he's talking, and someone has to translate for that person, like doesn't mean anything to me, right? So the community in that way is the peers that keep doing and seeing each other every other session, for a particular amount of time. We don't have strong communities. There are some strong communities, though. There are some strong communities that, like have committed to do work together, for years, actually. But I think those are the least right now. That's a weakness. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what are some of the favorite integration methods? Mandala drawings, you mentioned holotropic breathwork. What do you recommend to your clients? And also, what are these indicators to you that you look for that symbolize successful or not so successful integration process? What are you looking for in your intervention?
That's a very good question. It's a lot. As I say, I work with a variety of methods for integration, and it all depends on when do I take the person in. Is it right after a ceremony? Is it like a year after something happened? Is it 2 years after something? Is it a month or 2 when the person is coming back from a long plant diet from the jungle and just doesn't feels that everything is meaningless? Returning to Sweden, for example. What am I doing here, right? Like, nothing means anything, right? This loss, this grieving, that I was describing. So, yeah, what is recommended in much of the literature, is like, okay, right after the ceremony, use expressive arts methods that are a way of putting out non-verbally, symbolically, certain aspects of the experience that in the long run, as Stan Grof says, are prospective. You might even see like hints of where the process is going to when you look retrospectively at your work, right? And I think, I have seen that for some clients with open experiences for 3 weeks. I'm thinking particularly on one client where we worked in different ways. And nothing worked. The only thing that worked for that person was to do 8 hours of dance, just dance, and connecting. And then something happened that the experience was like accommodated in the body of that person, and she just like was able to go through. So it's very unique and particular to each individual, and that I think it's the difficulty on defining what are the steps, to go through a successful integration process. But what I see is that when there is successful integration process, the emotional charge of the experience, and also the continuous referral to the contents start to subside, and then there is like a larger understanding of one's own life, and a kind of deeper sense of direction and peacefulness, where the ceremony was like just something that helped a much larger process, which is your own life, Yeah.
Is it always a sort of go away from civilization or the big city to the jungle? Have you done any research on like lower dose substance use within the city, or more of on a smaller scale, so it's not as a huge contrast to coming back down to planet Earth?
What are you thinking of specifically?
Just what are the effects of a smaller dose within
You're
your,
talking within ceremonial context or
or
personal
not necessarily,
context, or
just the effect of
like the homeopathic intake of entheogens, something like that. I have heard about that, several times, and people doing it actually, like small doses every day, of
Yeah.
ayahuasca,
Yeah.
without really reaching, I have not really systematically seen or heard, of what the effects of this is. But I do know that there are people, I do know some people doing that actually, for themselves.
Can you comment and make some remarks about Takawasi's and how that's, from what I understand, it combines more modern techniques with traditional shamanic. So it differs from what other things that are happening in the Amazonian area, the Takawasi, how that differs. Can you say something about that?
Well, Takiwasi works normally with curanderos, right, with traditional healers. And then Jacques Mabi is the director, he's a French guy. He was trained also with, he has one main teacher, but he has also other teachers that have informed him. So he is, when there is no curandero available, because there are a lot of fights, it's not just like all roses down there. He's the one who conducts the sessions with his ex-wife, now they divorced, Rosa Jove. And she has not full training, but she's an amazing Icaro receiver. So she has beautiful Icaros that really support and balance out also the masculine and the feminine energy. They work basically with 3 pillars of Amazonian shamanism, therapeutic techniques that are plant diet, purga, purging, and in ceremonial context, and in ayahuasca ceremonies with males with addiction problems. Normally they are in treatment for 9 to 10 months and follow a particular set of guidelines. And then after ceremonies and after ceremonies and plant diets particularly, there is integration happening with in groups, and this is also something, that came to me when I was discussing, this reflection about not doing the sharing group right the next day. They normally wait 2 to 3 days before doing that, and then there is this sharing, that happens. That's an informal sharing right after when people are transitioning out of the ceremony, and then Jacques just like goes, or other people go and like listen and comment and then start telling stories, right? But this is not only there, this is widespread. Yeah.
Does it have a residential component or just outpatient?
It's all residential.
It's all residential.
15, they have not a lot of capacity, it's for 15 people, and all male. So there is integration happening individually and in group context for them, and then there are other things like ergotherapy. They, people engage in doing bread, making bread, and cultivating things, restoring parts of the infrastructure, etc. And yeah.
Yes, my partner and I do workshops or circles really of integration with expressive arts, movement, sound, all kinds of
Oh,
things
that's
like
wonderful.
that. And we feel like we're working in a vacuum. Do you know of any other circles that are doing that kind of work for people?
So they're making a movie about it.
Not enough to take people out of the reality of day to day that they have to be in, but enough to get them back
Deeper.
into their experience so that they can integrate. Do you know of any other circles? Could we sort of weave a connecting web of this kind of work? So you
No.
don't just have to be in the jungle.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I would love to connect with you and know better what you're doing, though, so we can do at least a little networking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
The differences of before moving to Northern California, I didn't know that people actually did ceremonies in houses in the city. I thought it was all in the jungle. Would you say if the differences are possible dangers or of doing it in a city versus outside in the jungle?
I think that I have tapped on that, like when I was talking about the different social container that you have down there and here. But there are a lot of other things to explore too. Like when you are down there for a while, you start going into understanding experientially the cosmology that they hold, and why certain things are in certain ways. When you're here and someone comes from down there, to do something carrying their cosmology, you're clueless about what they are doing.
I'm just talking about a connection to nature, like doing it outside in the jungle versus
Oh.
in someone's living room.
Well, that's also, in my experience, in shamanic context, you're working with all the forces of nature within a ceremony. So I don't think that it's impossible to do ceremonies in houses, but I think that there has to be a strong connection with the spirits of the land. But this is totally outside of the realm of psychology, right? Necessarily. I really think that there is a connection that is required, and also a befriendiness. You have to befriend that, and the shaman needs to know that and honor that, if there is a shamanic guide, shaman's guide.
Can I just make another comment to your very nice presentation?
Sure.
I just want to remark, jumping in your talk, like the role of prohibitionism in suffocating cultural support for experience. And it's just like the whole argument is that you have a setting and a cultural framework where people can take these substances and they have some sort of feedback and ground for that experience. So when you suppress this with prohibitionism and put these practices into the underground, you're mining the very essence of what gives support to these experiences. And that is one of the major damages of prohibitionism to the use of substances, because the role of ritual and culture and group is fundamental in what you're calling integration. That I use a more anthropological name, but I think we're talking about the same thing because I'm an anthropologist. So I'm talking about cultural context. You mentioned that a lot. And like everybody knows that, the set and setting plays a role. The fact is, for me as a Brazilian coming drinking ayahuasca in the US, I don't. But anyway, it's you because it's filming. I have a problem with these things of filming. Like when you are in Peru or Brazil, you can, for example, if you have a need, you go outside and get some air. What about if you're in a context where you have to do this underground, hidden, and you can't go outside vomit because there is neighbors that don't know what you're doing. And then people are locked in. They can't go out. So from the very small to the very big, there's a discontextualization that is harmful. And you can just see very strong contrast between the way people deal with ayahuasca in Brazil or the US. Like some people won't even say the word because they are just so paranoid. So how can you have any kind of, understanding of the experience if you cannot even talk about it? Because the word is forbidden because it's illegal. No?
Or create your own cultural context. We can't create our own cultural context. What does it mean today, here, now, to take these drugs? If the cultural context is so important, we have to rely on Brazil or Peru or what have you. We need our own. We need to create our own. We need to know what it is today, here, now, to take these.
The more I am here, I tend to agree with you, and I really think that there is a deep reflection to make explicit certain paradigmatic things that we are sitting on here that are blind to us in awareness. We need to make some things conscious, aware for ourselves in order to be in integrity when we create new forms. And I also think that we need to listen to the traditional ways and see what is there in a way that is coming back. Again, I feel that we have overlooked at things that we can learn a lot from.
Well, I just wanted to add to this conversation that we need to get creative in order to bring integration and create a new context here, because I'm Peruvian. If I go to the jungle, I was not born and raised in the jungle to get the benefit of integrating there, but I know the elements that work in general for people just because I've been with people that are from other countries and I'm from there, to bring to anywhere we go a sense of connection, a sense of nature, and a sense of holding. And I think that can be created anywhere we go.
I think those are mostly the teachings that this plant teacher is trying to bring us back to.
Thank you, Susana.